In the heart of America, where the ideals of justice and equality are often touted as foundational pillars, a silent struggle rages behind closed doors. It's a battle fought not only in the streets but also within the very institutions designed to protect and serve. This is a story about courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of justice by those who wear the badge, a story that reveals the ugly truth about racism in law enforcement. Meet Chief Marcus Wright, a seasoned police officer with over 2 decades of experience. He rose through the ranks, earning respect and admiration from his peers and community alike. But behind his confident exterior lies a deep-seated awareness of the systemic racism that permeates police culture. As an African-American officer, Chief Wright has witnessed firsthand the discrimination faced by his fellow black officers and community members. Growing up in a neighborhood plagued by crime and poverty, Marcus always dreamed of becoming a police officer. His goal was simple: to make a difference. However, as he donned his uniform for the first time, he quickly realized that the badge he wore did not shield him from prejudice. Instead, it often made him a target for suspicion and bias, both from within his department and outside it. In one particularly harrowing incident early in his career, Marcus was assigned to a routine patrol in a predominantly white neighborhood. He was pulled over by fellow officers who didn't recognize him in his patrol car. The officers approached with hostility, demanding identification and questioning his presence in the area. The irony was palpable. Here was a black officer trying to serve and protect, yet being treated as if he were a criminal. This experience would haunt him for years, serving as a constant reminder that even those who wear the badge can be judged by the color of their skin. As Chief Wright ascended to leadership roles within the department, he became increasingly aware of the pervasive culture of racism that existed among some of his colleagues. He heard stories from young black officers who faced ridicule and discrimination during their training. They were often subjected to racial slurs and ostracized for their backgrounds rather than celebrated for their dedication to duty. These experiences left deep scars, fostering an environment where fear overshadowed camaraderie. The turning point came when Chief Wright decided to go undercover to expose these injustices. He knew that confronting racism required more than just policy changes. It demanded action, real action, that would shake the very foundations of police culture. With his extensive knowledge of departmental operations and relationships with officers across ranks, he devised a plan that would allow him to gather evidence while remaining undetected. Undercover operations are fraught with risks, but Chief Wright was determined to shine a light on the darkness lurking within his own department. He began attending informal gatherings where officers would share their thoughts on race and policing, conversations often filled with derogatory remarks about minority communities. It was here that he gathered crucial insights into the mindset of those who perpetuated these harmful beliefs. As he delved deeper into this world, Chief Wright discovered an unsettling reality. Many officers believed they were above accountability. They dismissed complaints from minority officers as mere whining or attempts to undermine authority. This toxic culture created an atmosphere where racism thrived unchecked, leading to distrust between law enforcement and communities of color. Armed with this knowledge, Chief Wright knew he had to act swiftly and strategically. He began documenting incidents of racial bias within the department while simultaneously building alliances with like-minded officers who shared his vision for change. Together, they formed a covert group dedicated to addressing these issues head-on, an initiative aimed at fostering understanding and promoting diversity within their ranks. But change would not come easily. Resistance was fierce. Many were unwilling to confront their biases or acknowledge that racism existed within their own department. Yet Chief Wright remained undeterred. He understood that true leadership meant standing up against injustice, even when it meant facing backlash from those he once considered colleagues. As we journey through this story, we will explore not only Chief Wright's courageous efforts but also hear from other black officers who have faced similar struggles within law enforcement. Their stories will reveal the complexities of navigating a system designed to protect but often fails those it serves. Join us as we delve deeper into this compelling narrative, a tale of bravery in the face of adversity, where one man's mission to confront racism transforms not just himself but an entire community. This introduction sets up your video by establishing context, introducing key characters, and hinting at the challenges ahead while maintaining engagement through storytelling. Historical context. Racism within law enforcement is not a new phenomenon. It has deep roots in the history of policing in America. The origins of modern policing can be traced back to slave patrols in the southern United States, where groups of white men were tasked with capturing runaway slaves and maintaining control over enslaved populations. This legacy of racial oppression laid the groundwork for a system that often views communities of color with suspicion and hostility. As America evolved, so did its policing practices. The civil rights movement of the 1960s brought to light the egregious abuses faced by African Americans at the hands of law enforcement. High-profile incidents, such as the violent response to peaceful protests in Selma and Birmingham, showcased a police force that was often complicit in upholding systemic racism. Despite significant progress in civil rights legislation, many Black communities continued to experience discriminatory policing practices. The modern-era statistics and findings. Fast forward to today, and the statistics surrounding race and policing remain alarming. According to a report by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, Black Americans are more likely to be stopped by police than their white counterparts. In many urban areas, studies have shown that Black individuals are disproportionately subjected to stops, searches, and arrests. A 2019 analysis by the Stanford Open Policing Project found that Black drivers were 20% more likely to be pulled over than white drivers, despite being less likely to be found with illegal substances during searches. These disparities are not merely numbers, they represent real lives affected by systemic bias. For instance, consider the story of Officer Lisa Johnson, a Black woman who joined her local police department with hopes of bridging gaps between law enforcement and her community. During her training, she was often told she was too sensitive when she raised concerns about racial jokes made by her colleagues. Over time, Lisa learned to keep her head down and avoid conflict, a painful compromise that many officers of color feel they must make to survive in an environment rife with prejudice. Personal accounts, voices from within. The experiences of officers like Lisa highlight a troubling reality. Many Black officers feel isolated within their departments. They grapple with dual identities, serving as both protectors of their communities and targets of discrimination within their own ranks. In a candid interview, Officer David Mitchell shared his story. "When I first joined the force, I was excited," he recalled. "I thought I could change things from within. But almost immediately, I faced hostility from some colleagues who didn't think I belonged there." David described how he was often assigned to less desirable shifts or left out of important discussions simply because of his race. He recounted one incident where he was called to assist on a domestic violence case. Upon arrival, he overheard two white officers joking about how they would handle the situation if it involved a Black suspect. "It was shocking," David said. "Here we were supposed to be professionals, but they were making jokes that perpetuated harmful stereotypes." This moment crystallized his understanding that racism wasn't just an external issue, it was embedded within the very fabric of his workplace. The impact on community relations. The consequences of this internal racism extend beyond individual officers. They have profound implications for community relations as well. When police departments fail to address issues of bias within their ranks, it breeds distrust among the very communities they serve. Many residents view law enforcement as an occupying force rather than a partner in public safety. Chief Wright recognized this disconnect early in his career. He often attended community meetings where residents voiced their frustrations about police interactions. "They didn't see us as allies," he reflected. "They saw us as part of the problem." This perception was fueled by high-profile incidents involving police violence against unarmed Black individuals, events that sparked nationwide protests and calls for reform. In response to these growing tensions, many police departments have attempted reforms aimed at improving community relations. However, without addressing internal biases, these efforts often fall short. Community members remain skeptical when they see officers who do not reflect their demographics or understand their experiences. The role of training and accountability. Training is another critical component in addressing racism within law enforcement. Many departments have implemented diversity training programs designed to raise awareness about implicit bias and promote cultural competency among officers. However, these programs can be ineffective if not backed by genuine commitment from leadership. In Chief Wright's department, he initiated a series of workshops aimed at fostering open discussions about race among officers. He invited guest speakers from various backgrounds, community leaders, activists, and even former offenders to share their perspectives on policing and race relations. While some officers embraced these opportunities for growth, others resisted change, viewing such initiatives as unnecessary or politically motivated. Accountability is equally important in combating racism within police forces. When officers engage in discriminatory behavior or use excessive force based on race, there must be clear consequences for their actions. Unfortunately, many departments have historically failed to hold officers accountable for misconduct due to a culture of silence and protectionism, a phenomenon often referred to as the blue wall of silence. It's a call for change. As Chief Wright continued his undercover work within his department, he understood that exposing racism required more than just gathering evidence. It necessitated a cultural shift towards accountability and transparency. He began drafting proposals for policy changes aimed at addressing systemic bias initiatives that would require buy-in from both leadership and rank-and-file officers. His vision included implementing regular reviews of officer conduct through body camera footage analysis and establishing an independent oversight committee composed of community members who could provide input on policing practices. These changes would not only enhance accountability but also rebuild trust between law enforcement and the communities they served. In this segment of our story, we've explored how deeply entrenched racism affects both police officers and communities alike, a cycle that perpetuates mistrust and division. As we continue our journey with Chief Wright and other brave officers willing to confront these injustices head-on, we will witness their struggles and triumphs as they strive for meaningful change within their department. This second segment provides a comprehensive exploration of racism in police departments while incorporating personal stories that humanize the statistics and historical context discussed earlier. It sets up further developments in Chief Wright's journey as he seeks to enact change within his department. The weight of dual identities. As we continue our exploration of racism within law enforcement, it's essential to hear from those who live this reality every day. The stories of Black officers reveal not only the challenges they face within their departments but also the emotional toll that systemic racism takes on their lives. These narratives highlight a profound struggle balancing their duty as law enforcement officers with their identity as members of marginalized communities. Officer Lisa Johnson, who we met earlier, shared her journey in a candid interview. "When I put on my uniform, I feel proud," she said. "But there's always this nagging feeling that I have to prove myself more than my white counterparts." Lisa recounted an incident during her first year on the force when she was assigned to a community outreach program aimed at building trust with local residents. Despite her enthusiasm, she faced skepticism from both her colleagues and the community. "Some of my fellow officers didn't take me seriously," she explained. "They thought I was just trying to play the race card or that I was being overly sensitive." This dismissive attitude made it difficult for Lisa to connect with community members who were already wary of law enforcement. "I felt like I was fighting two battles, one against racism within my department and another against the stereotypes that people held about police." The isolation of Black officers. Officer David Mitchell's experiences echoed Lisa's sentiments. He described how he often felt isolated within his department, particularly during social events where racial jokes and derogatory comments were commonplace. "It was like being in a room full of people who didn't see me as an equal," David recalled. "I would laugh along to avoid conflict, but inside it hurt." David's turning point came during a departmental training session focused on community policing. He decided to speak up about his experiences with racism and how they affected his ability to serve effectively. "I stood up and shared my story about being pulled over by fellow officers," he said. "I could feel the tension in the room. Some people were uncomfortable, but others nodded in understanding." To his surprise, several other officers approached him afterward, sharing their own stories of feeling marginalized or dismissed within the department. "That moment showed me that I wasn't alone," David reflected. "There were others who felt just as frustrated and hurt by the culture we were in." The emotional toll. The emotional toll of working in a racially charged environment is significant. Many Black officers report experiencing anxiety and depression as a result of their experiences on the force. Officer Johnson shared how these feelings manifested in her daily life. "I would come home after a shift feeling drained," she admitted. "It wasn't just the physical exhaustion, it was mental and emotional too." Lisa began seeking support through counseling services offered by her department, but she found them lacking in understanding her unique struggles as a Black officer. "The counselors didn't get it," she said. "They would say things like, 'Just focus on your job,' or 'Don't take it personally,' but how can you not take it personally when your identity is constantly under attack?" This lack of support is not uncommon among minority officers. Many feel they must navigate their challenges alone, fearing that speaking out could jeopardize their careers or lead to further ostracism from their colleagues. The impact on community relations. The struggles faced by Black officers extend beyond their personal lives. They have profound implications for police community relations. When officers feel unsupported or marginalized within their departments, it affects their ability to connect with the communities they serve. Chief Wright recognized this dynamic early on in his undercover work. He observed how many Black officers hesitated to engage with community members out of fear of being judged by their peers or facing backlash for showing empathy towards residents. It creates a cycle of mistrust, he noted. If officers don't feel supported, they're less likely to build relationships with the community. In one instance, Chief Wright witnessed an interaction between Officer Mitchell and a group of teenagers who had gathered on a street corner. Instead of approaching them with hostility, David chose to engage in conversation, asking about their interests and concerns. However, when other officers arrived on the scene, they immediately assumed the teens were up to no good and began questioning them aggressively. This is what happens when you have a culture that doesn't value community engagement, Chief Wright observed. David was trying to do the right thing, but he was undermined by colleagues who didn't understand or care about building trust. A turning point: collective action. Recognizing the need for change within his department, Chief Wright began organizing meetings with Black officers to discuss their experiences and brainstorm solutions. These gatherings provided a safe space for officers to share their stories without fear of judgment or reprisal. "We called ourselves the Alliance," Lisa explained. "It was a group of us who wanted to make a difference not just for ourselves but for our communities." The Alliance became a platform for advocating for policy changes and promoting diversity training within the department. During one meeting, David proposed an initiative aimed at increasing representation among new recruits. "If we want to change the culture, we need more voices at the table," he argued passionately. The group agreed that diversifying recruitment efforts would be essential in fostering an inclusive environment where all officers felt valued. Building bridges: community engagement initiatives. As the Alliance gained momentum, Chief Wright encouraged its members to engage directly with community organizations focused on racial justice and police reform. They collaborated with local activists to host workshops aimed at educating both officers and residents about implicit bias and effective communication strategies. One successful initiative involved hosting community forums where residents could voice their concerns directly to police leadership. These events provided an opportunity for open dialogue, a chance for residents to share their experiences with law enforcement while allowing officers to listen and learn. At one forum, Lisa spoke candidly about her experiences as a Black officer and the challenges she faced both internally and externally. Her vulnerability resonated deeply with community members who had long felt unheard by law enforcement. "I remember seeing tears in people's eyes," Lisa recalled later. "It was powerful because it showed that we could connect on a human level despite our differences." This level of engagement marked a significant shift in how both parties viewed each other, moving from suspicion towards understanding. Resistance and challenges. Despite these positive developments, resistance remained strong within certain factions of the department. Some veteran officers viewed the Alliance's initiatives as unnecessary disruptions and affront to traditional policing methods that prioritized authority over empathy. During one heated departmental meeting, an older officer voiced his frustrations. "We're here to enforce laws, not coddle criminals. This is what's wrong with policing today: too much focus on feelings." His words echoed through the room, revealing deep-seated beliefs that continued to undermine efforts toward reform. Chief Wright stood firm against such sentiments, emphasizing that effective policing requires building trust rather than instilling fear. He reminded his colleagues that fostering positive relationships with communities ultimately leads to safer neighborhoods for everyone involved. A vision for change. As the Alliance continued its work within both the department and community spaces, Chief Wright began drafting proposals for systemic changes aimed at addressing racism head-on. Diversity recruitment initiatives: implementing targeted outreach programs aimed at attracting candidates from diverse backgrounds. Comprehensive bias training: establishing mandatory training sessions focused on recognizing implicit bias and understanding its impact on policing practices. Community oversight committees: creating independent boards composed of community members tasked with reviewing police conduct and providing input on departmental policies. Mental health support services: expanding access to counseling services specifically tailored for minority officers facing unique challenges related to racism. These proposals represented not only Chief Wright's vision for change but also reflected the collective voices of Black officers who had bravely shared their stories, rooted in pain, yet filled with hope for a better future. Conclusion: a journey towards healing. As we conclude this segment of our story, we've witnessed firsthand how deeply entrenched racism impacts both individual officers and communities alike, a cycle perpetuated by fear, misunderstanding, and isolation. Yet amidst these challenges emerges a powerful narrative of resilience: the determination among Black officers like Lisa Johnson and David Mitchell to confront injustice head-on while advocating for meaningful change within their departments. In our next segment, we will delve into Chief Wright's undercover operations as he gathers evidence against those perpetuating racism within his ranks, while navigating resistance from colleagues unwilling to confront uncomfortable truths. Join us as we continue this journey, a journey towards healing where courage meets compassion in the fight against systemic racism in law enforcement. This third segment provides personal accounts from Black officers facing discrimination, while highlighting their efforts toward collective action and reform within law enforcement agencies. It sets up anticipation for Chief Wright's undercover operations in the next part, while maintaining engagement through storytelling and emotional resonance. The decision to go undercover. As Chief Marcus Wright delved deeper into the systemic issues plaguing his department, he realized that simply raising awareness and fostering dialogue were not enough. To effect real change, he needed concrete evidence of the racism and discrimination that permeated the ranks. This realization led him to make a bold decision to go undercover within his own department. Going undercover was fraught with risks. Chief Wright understood that if discovered, he could face severe backlash not only from his colleagues but also from the community that had placed its trust in him. However, he believed that exposing the truth was essential for initiating meaningful reform. Sometimes you have to take risks to create change, he reflected. I knew I had to do this for my officers and for the communities we serve. The undercover plan. To effectively execute his plan, Chief Wright needed to adopt a different persona, one that would allow him to blend in with officers who held prejudiced views. He crafted a backstory as a seasoned officer who had recently transferred from another department, someone who was eager to fit in and prove himself. This new identity would give him access to informal gatherings where racist attitudes often surfaced. Before embarking on this mission, Chief Wright met with members of the Alliance to discuss his plan. "I want your support," he told them. "This isn't just about me, it's about all of us." The officers expressed their concerns but ultimately recognized the importance of gathering evidence to confront racism head-on. "Just be careful," Lisa Johnson advised. "You're going into a dangerous environment, and not everyone will be welcoming." Her words resonated with Chief Wright as he prepared for the challenges ahead. Gathering evidence. Chief Wright began his undercover work by attending informal gatherings where officers socialized after shifts. These events often served as breeding grounds for racist jokes and derogatory comments about communities of color. With each gathering, he documented conversations and interactions, carefully noting instances of bias or discrimination. At one particular gathering, Chief Wright overheard a group of officers laughing about a recent arrest involving a black suspect. They made jokes about how they would handle similar situations in the future, using racial slurs and derogatory language. "It was shocking," he recalled later. "These were supposed to be my colleagues, people I worked alongside every day, but they were perpetuating harmful stereotypes without a second thought." He discreetly recorded these conversations using a small audio device hidden in his clothing, ensuring that he had concrete evidence of their behavior. With each passing week, Chief Wright collected more recordings that painted a disturbing picture of racism within the department. Facing resistance. As Chief Wright continued his undercover operations, he faced increasing resistance from some officers who sensed that something was amiss. A few began questioning his commitment to the department and expressed skepticism about his background story. "You're not one of us," one officer said pointedly during a break room conversation. "You don't understand how things really work around here." Despite these challenges, Chief Wright remained focused on his mission. He knew that exposing these biases was crucial for fostering accountability within the department. However, the emotional toll of maintaining his undercover identity weighed heavily on him. "I felt like I was living a double life," he admitted. "On one hand, I was trying to gather evidence. On the other hand, I was constantly worried about being discovered." This tension created an internal conflict that left him feeling isolated from both his colleagues and the community. A critical incident. The turning point in Chief Wright's undercover operation came during an incident involving an arrest in a predominantly black neighborhood. He had been monitoring a group of officers conducting what appeared to be an unnecessary stop and frisk operation on several young black men. As tensions escalated between the officers and the community members who had gathered to witness the incident, Chief Wright felt compelled to intervene, not just as an undercover officer but as a leader committed to justice. "I couldn't stand by and watch this happen," he recalled. He stepped forward and identified himself as a police officer while urging his colleagues to de-escalate the situation. "We need to treat these individuals with respect," he asserted firmly. The response from some officers was immediate and hostile. They accused him of being too soft on crime and not understanding their approach to policing. However, witnessing this incident firsthand solidified his resolve to bring their behavior into the light. The evidence compiled. After weeks of undercover work, Chief Wright compiled a comprehensive dossier containing audio recordings, notes from conversations, and detailed accounts of discriminatory practices within the department. This evidence painted a clear picture of systemic racism, a culture where biases were not only tolerated but often celebrated among certain factions. He presented this dossier during a closed-door meeting with upper management and city officials responsible for overseeing police operations. As he laid out his findings, there was palpable tension in the room. Some officials visibly squirmed at the revelations, while others attempted to downplay their significance. This isn't just about individual behavior, Chief Wright emphasized passionately. It's about creating an environment where racism is unacceptable, where every officer feels empowered to speak out against it. The backlash. Despite presenting compelling evidence, Chief Wright faced significant backlash from some members of leadership who were resistant to acknowledging systemic issues within their ranks. "You're making us look bad," one senior officer told him bluntly after the meeting concluded. "We can't afford this kind of publicity." The pressure mounted as media outlets began picking up on rumors surrounding internal investigations within the department. Chief Wright found himself at a crossroads. Would he continue fighting for change despite facing opposition from those in power? In moments of doubt, he turned to the Alliance for support. During one meeting with fellow officers, they discussed strategies for addressing leadership's resistance while remaining committed to their mission. "We have each other's backs," David Mitchell reassured him. "We can't let fear hold us back now." Rallying support. With renewed determination, Chief Wright rallied support from both the Alliance and community organizations advocating for police reform. Together, they organized public forums where residents could voice their concerns about policing practices while demanding accountability from law enforcement leaders. At one particularly impactful forum held at a local community center, residents spoke candidly about their experiences with police discrimination while expressing solidarity with officers who were willing to confront these issues head-on. "Change starts here," Chief Wright declared during his opening remarks. "We must work together, officers and community members, to dismantle racism in our department." The atmosphere was electric as attendees shared stories of hope amidst adversity, stories that underscored their desire for meaningful reform rather than empty promises. The turning tide. No. As public pressure mounted on police leadership following these forums and with media coverage highlighting ongoing issues within departments across the country, Chief Wright began noticing shifts in attitudes among some senior officials. In subsequent meetings with leadership teams discussing departmental policies related to diversity training and community engagement initiatives began gaining traction. Discussions previously met with resistance now seemed more open-minded. "Maybe we can explore implementing some changes based on what we've learned," one senior official suggested tentatively during a strategy session focused on improving community relations. While progress felt slow, at times incremental rather than revolutionary, Chief Wright remained hopeful that their collective efforts would lead toward lasting change within law enforcement culture. A call for accountability. As momentum built around reform initiatives led by both the Alliance and community advocates alike, Chief Wright prepared himself for yet another critical step, holding those responsible accountable for perpetuating racism within their ranks. Armed with evidence gathered during his undercover operations and bolstered by support from fellow officers committed to confronting bias, he approached city officials once more regarding disciplinary actions against identified individuals involved in discriminatory practices documented throughout investigations conducted over recent months. "We cannot allow this behavior to continue unchecked," he asserted firmly during meetings aimed at addressing accountability measures moving forward. His calls echoed throughout city halls across America, where similar conversations unfolded nationwide, a collective reckoning calling attention towards systemic injustices embedded deeply within policing structures everywhere. Conclusion: a path forward. As we conclude this segment of our story, the journey taken by Chief Marcus Wright illuminates both personal sacrifice required when confronting entrenched biases alongside broader societal implications surrounding policing today. Through courageous undercover work exposing racism within law enforcement, the efforts made by dedicated individuals like Lisa Johnson, David Mitchell demonstrate resilience amid adversity, while advocating tirelessly toward meaningful reform efforts aimed at dismantling systemic injustice once for all. In our next segment, we will explore how these efforts culminate into actionable changes, transforming not only individual lives but entire communities seeking justice, equality moving forward. Join us as we continue this journey, a journey toward healing where courage meets compassion in fighting against systemic racism within law enforcement. This fourth segment captures Chief Wright's undercover operations as he gathers evidence against racism within his department, while navigating resistance from leadership and rallying support from fellow officers and community members. It sets up anticipation for actionable changes in the final segment while maintaining engagement through storytelling and emotional depth. The aftermath of exposing racism. Following Chief Marcus Wright's courageous undercover operations, the department faced intense scrutiny from both the public and city officials. The evidence he gathered revealed a troubling culture of racism that could no longer be ignored. As discussions about accountability and reform intensified, Chief Wright found himself at the forefront of a movement aimed at transforming not only his department, but also the broader landscape of policing. In the weeks following the release of his findings, Chief Wright organized a series of meetings with department leadership to discuss actionable steps toward reform. "We have an opportunity to reshape our culture," he urged during one meeting. "This isn't just about punishment, it's about creating an environment where every officer feels valued and respected." Implementing change policy revisions. The first step in this transformative process was revising departmental policies related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Chief Wright advocated for comprehensive training programs focused on implicit bias, cultural competency, and community engagement. He emphasized that these programs must be mandatory for all officers, from new recruits to seasoned veterans. Training isn't a one-time event, it's an ongoing commitment, he stressed. We need to create a culture of learning where officers are encouraged to reflect on their biases and understand their impact on policing practices. In response to these recommendations, department leadership began collaborating with external experts in diversity training to develop a robust curriculum. This curriculum included workshops that facilitated open discussions about race, privilege, and the historical context of policing in America. Establishing accountability measures. Alongside training initiatives, Chief Wright pushed for establishing accountability measures that would hold officers responsible for their actions. He proposed creating an independent oversight committee composed of community members and law enforcement professionals tasked with reviewing complaints against officers and monitoring departmental practices. "This committee will serve as a bridge between our department and the community," he explained during a public forum. "It's essential that we build trust by allowing residents to have a voice in how we operate." Community members responded positively to this proposal. Many expressed relief at the prospect of having their concerns taken seriously, while feeling empowered to hold law enforcement accountable for their actions. Building community trust. As reforms began taking shape within the department, Chief Wright recognized that rebuilding trust with the community would require more than policy changes. It necessitated genuine engagement. He initiated outreach programs aimed at fostering relationships between officers and residents, efforts designed to humanize law enforcement while addressing historical grievances. One such initiative involved organizing community forums where residents could share their experiences with police while offering suggestions for improvement. These forums provided a platform for open dialogue, allowing both sides to express their concerns and aspirations for a safer community. During one particularly impactful forum, Lisa Johnson shared her story as a Black officer navigating systemic racism within her own ranks. "I want you all to know that there are officers who care deeply about this community," she said passionately. "We're here to serve you, but we need your trust to do our jobs effectively." Her vulnerability resonated with attendees, many of whom expressed gratitude for her honesty while acknowledging their own fears and frustrations regarding police interactions. Success stories, positive outcomes. As time went on, positive outcomes began emerging from these efforts. Officers who participated in diversity training reported feeling more equipped to engage with diverse communities respectfully and empathetically. Many shared success stories about de-escalating potentially volatile situations through effective communication rather than aggression. David Mitchell recounted one such incident during a community event where tensions were high due to ongoing protests against police violence. "Instead of approaching the crowd with force," he explained, "we decided to engage them in conversation. This approach led to meaningful exchanges between officers and residents, conversations that ultimately diffused tensions while fostering understanding. I realized then how powerful it can be when we take the time to listen," David reflected. "It's not just about enforcing laws, it's about building relationships." Addressing remaining challenges. Despite these successes, challenges remained. Some officers resisted change, clinging to outdated beliefs about policing that prioritized authority over empathy. Chief Wright acknowledged that shifting mindsets would take time but emphasized the importance of perseverance. "We can't let fear or resistance deter us from our mission," he reminded his team during a departmental meeting. "Every step forward counts, even if it feels small." To address lingering skepticism among some officers, Chief Wright organized mentorship programs pairing veteran officers with newer recruits from diverse backgrounds. This initiative aimed not only to foster camaraderie but also encourage open dialogue about race and bias within policing. The role of community partnerships. Recognizing that sustainable change required collaboration beyond departmental walls, Chief Wright sought partnerships with local organizations dedicated to racial justice and community empowerment. Together, they developed initiatives focused on youth engagement programs designed to educate young people about law enforcement while providing them opportunities for positive interactions with officers. One such program involved hosting workshops in schools where officers served as mentors for students interested in pursuing careers in law enforcement or public service. These workshops emphasized the importance of integrity, accountability, and community service values that resonated deeply with both students and officers alike. Measuring impact. Community feedback. As reforms took root within the department, Chief Wright prioritized gathering feedback from both officers and community members regarding their experiences with new initiatives. Surveys were distributed widely, allowing individuals an opportunity to voice their opinions on training effectiveness, community relations efforts, and overall perceptions of police conduct. The results were promising. Many residents reported feeling more confident in their interactions with law enforcement while expressing appreciation for ongoing efforts toward transparency and accountability. Change is happening, one resident remarked during a follow-up forum. It may not be perfect yet, but I can see that there are real efforts being made. It's a new era in policing. As months passed since Chief Wright's undercover operations first exposed racism within his department, a new era began unfolding, one characterized by hope rather than fear, collaboration rather than division. With each passing day came renewed opportunities for growth, both personally and professionally, for every officer willing to embrace change while committing themselves fully towards serving their communities effectively, compassionately. Chief Wright stood proudly alongside his fellow officers at a recent graduation ceremony for new recruits, a diverse class representing various backgrounds, experiences, eager to join ranks, committed towards fostering justice, equality moving forward. This is just the beginning, he declared during his speech addressing graduates, attendees alike. Together, we will continue building bridges between our department communities, ensuring everyone feels safe, respected, valued. Conclusion: a journey towards healing. As we conclude this powerful narrative, the journey taken by Chief Marcus Wright illustrates how courage, resilience, determination can lead towards transformative change within institutions long plagued by systemic racism. Through undercover work exposing biases entrenched deeply within policing culture, alongside collective efforts made by dedicated individuals like Lisa Johnson, David Mitchell, we have witnessed firsthand what is possible when we confront uncomfortable truths head-on. In this final segment, we celebrate not only victories achieved but also recognize ongoing challenges faced along this path toward healing, a journey requiring continuous commitment from all involved. Join us as we reflect upon lessons learned throughout this story, a story reminding us all that together we can create meaningful change while striving towards justice, equity, compassion within law enforcement. This fifth segment wraps up your video by detailing the aftermath of Chief Wright's undercover operations and highlighting the transformative changes implemented within his department. It emphasizes collaboration between law enforcement and communities while celebrating successes achieved through collective efforts toward reform. As Chief Marcus Wright and his department embraced a new era of reform, they quickly realized that change is not a linear process. While many officers were committed to fostering a culture of inclusivity and accountability, others remained resistant to the shifts taking place within their ranks. This resistance manifested in various ways, from subtle undermining of reform initiatives to outright hostility towards colleagues advocating for change. Chief Wright understood that addressing these challenges required ongoing dialogue and education. He initiated regular meetings with both supporters and skeptics within the department, creating a safe space for officers to express their concerns while also encouraging constructive conversations about the importance of reform. Change can be uncomfortable, he acknowledged during one meeting, but it's essential for our growth as individuals and as a department. We need to confront our biases and work together to create a culture where everyone feels valued. The role of leadership. Leadership played a critical role in navigating these challenges. Chief Wright recognized that he needed to model the behaviors he expected from his officers. He made it a point to engage with community members regularly, attending events and forums where he could listen to their concerns firsthand. By being visible and approachable, Chief Wright aimed to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. He often reminded his officers that their role extended beyond enforcing laws. They were also community stewards responsible for building trust and fostering relationships. Every interaction we have with residents is an opportunity, he would say. An opportunity to show them that we care about their safety and well-being. Success stories, transformative impact. As time progressed, Success stories began to emerge from the department's reform efforts. Officers who had previously been skeptical of change started to see the positive impact of community engagement initiatives. They witnessed firsthand how building relationships with residents led to increased cooperation in investigations and improved public safety outcomes. One particularly poignant story involved Officer Sarah Lopez, who had initially resisted participating in diversity training. After attending several workshops, she began to shift her perspective on policing and community relations. Inspired by her newfound understanding, Sarah took it upon herself to lead outreach efforts in her neighborhood. "I realized that I had been part of the problem," she admitted during a departmental meeting. "But now I want to be part of the solution. It's about more than just enforcing laws, it's about understanding people's lives." Sarah's transformation inspired other officers to reflect on their own biases and consider how they could contribute positively to their communities. Community engagement: building bridges. Chief Wright continued to prioritize community engagement as a cornerstone of his department's reform efforts. He launched several initiatives aimed at fostering collaboration between law enforcement and residents, including community advisory boards. These boards consisted of diverse community members who provided input on policing practices, policies, and priorities. Their insights helped shape departmental strategies while ensuring that residents felt heard. Youth mentorship programs: officers volunteered as mentors for young people in local schools, providing guidance on career paths while emphasizing the importance of integrity and accountability. Public safety workshops: the department hosted workshops focused on educating residents about their rights, self-defense strategies, and how to effectively communicate with law enforcement during encounters. These initiatives not only strengthened relationships between officers and community members, but also empowered residents by giving them a voice in shaping policing practices. And the broader implications. The reforms initiated by Chief Wright's department began to attract attention beyond their local community. Other police departments across the country took notice of their success stories and sought guidance on implementing similar changes within their own ranks. Chief Wright was invited to speak at national conferences focused on police reform, sharing his experiences and insights with law enforcement leaders from around the country. "What we've accomplished here is just the beginning," he emphasized during one keynote address. "We have a responsibility to lead by example, not just for our communities but for all those who wear the badge." His message resonated with many attendees who recognized that systemic racism within policing was not an isolated issue, it was pervasive across departments nationwide. Inspiring change and national movement. As Chief Wright continued advocating for reform at national levels, his efforts contributed toward a growing movement calling for comprehensive changes within law enforcement agencies across America. Activists, community leaders, and police reform advocates rallied together demanding accountability, transparency, and equitable treatment for all citizens regardless of race or background. Public protests erupted in cities throughout the nation, drawing attention toward long-standing issues surrounding police violence against marginalized communities, while amplifying calls for justice reform initiatives aimed at dismantling systemic racism embedded within policing structures everywhere. Chief Wright stood alongside activists during these demonstrations, showing solidarity with those advocating for change while emphasizing that true progress requires collaboration between law enforcement agencies, communities alike. And the future of policing. Looking ahead, Chief Wright envisioned a future where policing was rooted in principles of equity, justice, compassion, where every officer understood their role as guardians rather than enforcers. He believed that by continuing down this path, law enforcement could evolve into an institution truly reflective of society's values, one committed towards serving, protecting all citizens equally. To ensure sustainability, the department established ongoing training programs focused on cultural competency, implicit bias, ensuring new recruits receive comprehensive education before entering the field. Additionally, mentorship programs pairing experienced officers with newer recruits fostered an environment conducive toward learning growth. "The future is bright," Chief Wright declared during another public forum held at a local community center. "But it will require ongoing commitment from each one of us to uphold our values while striving toward excellence." Celebrating milestones. As milestones were achieved along this transformative journey, the department celebrated successes, both big and small. From hosting community events designed around fostering dialogue to recognizing individual officers' contributions toward building trust, their collective efforts served as reminders that progress is possible when people come together united behind common goals. One such celebration involved honoring Officer David Mitchell for his outstanding work engaging youth through mentorship programs. During an awards ceremony held at City Hall, David spoke passionately about his experiences working with young people eager to learn more about law enforcement careers. It's not just about being an officer, he shared with attendees. It's about being a role model, showing these kids what it means to serve others while making positive impacts within our communities. It's a legacy of change. As Chief Wright reflected on all that had transpired since his undercover operations began, it became clear that this journey was not merely about exposing racism, it was about creating lasting change, a legacy built upon principles rooted in justice, equity. He understood that while challenges remained, the path forward lay illuminated by hope, a hope fueled by collective action taken toward dismantling systemic injustices entrenched deeply within policing culture. In closing remarks delivered during yet another public forum, Chief Wright emphasized, "Together we can create meaningful change. Together we can build bridges between law enforcement and our communities. And together we will ensure justice prevails." Conclusion: a call to action. As we conclude this powerful narrative, the journey taken by Chief Marcus Wright serves as an inspiring testament, illustrating how courage, resilience, determination can lead toward transformative change within institutions long plagued by systemic racism. Through collective efforts made by dedicated individuals like Lisa Johnson, David Mitchell, we have witnessed firsthand what is possible when we confront uncomfortable truths head-on. In this final segment, we celebrate not only victories achieved but also recognize ongoing challenges faced along this path toward healing, a journey requiring continuous commitment from all involved. Join us as we reflect upon lessons learned throughout this story, a story reminding us all that together we can create meaningful change while striving towards justice, equity, compassion within law enforcement. This sixth segment wraps up your video by discussing ongoing challenges after reforms, celebrating successes achieved through collective efforts, and emphasizing the importance of continued commitment towards building trust between law enforcement and communities. It sets an inspirational tone for viewers while encouraging further dialogue on police reform nationwide.